I'm Anna Urban, and this is the Wildly Different podcast. I'm going to talk about all the wildly different takes out there on ADHD, neurodivergence, spirituality, manifestation, the meaning of life, trauma, shame, joy, purpose, and of course, all the actionable, practical strategies from the super scientific to the super esoteric. Some episodes will leave you with more questions than answers, but that's exactly the point. Is ADHD a disorder or a gift? Are we here to hack our time or maybe even to reimagine what productivity looks like entirely? How do we get ourselves to do the things we say we're going to do, even when every cell in our body would rather do something else? Are we neurodivergent, or are we aliens from Atlantis sent here to evolve humanity? Are supplements a scam? What's the deal with ADHD meds, and why do we have so much drama about it? If any of these questions resonate with you, then you've come to the right place. Let's get untamed. Welcome, my wild humans, to the very first episode of the Wildly Different podcast. I'm Anna Urban, and I'm here to expand into a bigger version of myself. I'm here to challenge outdated narratives, and I'm here to have fun doing it, and I'm here to show you how you can do the same. I'm so excited to get into it today. Let's get wild. This podcast is going to be about mental health and ADHD, but also spirituality, manifestation, our relationship to time, money, and each other, trauma, shame, joy, and of course, all of the actionable, practical strategies from the super scientific to the super esoteric. Because what I've found is that there are some things in life that you just can't measure. You can't put them on a data point or on a bar graph or in a peer-reviewed study, because being human is messy. At the end of each episode, I want to leave you with a question, something that you can use to reflect on and apply to your own life. And my hope is that each episode leaves you with more questions than answers, because that is actually how you know that you are really learning and integrating and evolving. I want to kick off this very first episode with a little bit about me and my story and what I'm all about, what this podcast is all about. I'm 36 years old. I'm a mother of two. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an educator. I'm a first-generation American. And I'm an ADHD coach and the founder of a group coaching program, ADHD Untamed. I'm the creator of the Untitled Freedom Formula, which I'll explain in detail in later episodes. ADHD is a huge part of my story. But I don't want to say that this is an ADHD podcast because it is so much deeper than that. I am so much more than just someone with ADHD. ADHD is not my identity. And my hope is that you don't allow it to be yours either. And I want to lay it all out there right from the very beginning and say that I personally don't view ADHD as a disorder. And I know that that's controversial to say. I know that maybe some experts would disagree with me. I know what they say. I know what the psychiatrists say. I know what the DSM-5 says. I know it, okay? I really don't see it that way. And my clients really don't see it that way. 5 years ago, I would have said that yes, ADHD is a disorder and people with ADHD are at a severe disadvantage and it's not fair and it's a shame. And honestly, it didn't really help. It didn't really get me anywhere. Because I was so fixated on this being a disorder and what is wrong with me and, how can I fix it? I really didn't see it as an opportunity for me to grow. I really didn't see it as an opportunity for me to challenge myself. I didn't see the divine purpose behind all of it. This doesn't mean that I am dismissing ADHD, and I'll get to that in a minute. I have a master's degree in education. I was a teacher for 10 years, and honestly, I really thrived as a teacher. I did not thrive in my previous career before that as a publicist. I crashed and burned, but as a teacher, I crushed it. I was really, really good at my job, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I figured out a lot of things about life and about myself and what it means to be human and what it means to have ADHD during those 10 years. I learned what it means to honor yourself and to honor the different ways that the brain was wired. I taught general ed as well as inclusion classes, which meant that kids with special needs with IEPs for things like ADHD were mixed into the class. And this goes without saying, but it was always really important to me and to my administrators that nobody in the class would know who had an IEP and who didn't. Nobody was ever going to be labeled as the ADHD kid unless they themselves offered up that information. Because I had ADHD myself, I structured my lessons in a way that helped me. So to be honest, when I was teaching, it was easier to just treat everyone like they had ADHD. And my kids thrived in my class. Honestly, I would end up forgetting who had ADHD because everything in my class included scaffolding and repeating instruction different ways and visual timers and pursuing what you were interested in. And it was only when I was needed for an IEP meeting that I was like, oh yeah, so-and-so has ADHD. Well, he's doing great in my class, so nothing to report on my end. I allowed the kids to sit wherever the hell they wanted. I allowed them to work in groups or independently. We did a lot of project-based learning, and I allowed them to choose what they wanted to research and what they wanted to present at the end of their project. If they wanted to write a song or make a presentation or a skit, I really didn't care. What mattered to me was that they were learning the skills, whatever skills we were working on for that unit. And I think that as adults, we lose sight of that because most of the time we were taught that we needed to fit into this specific box. And if we didn't, that there was something wrong with us. We don't all want to be doctors or lawyers or teachers or accountants or content creators or gardeners. We don't all want to be the same thing. We don't all have the same purpose, the same passion, the same values. So why then are we forcing kids and then in adulthood, forcing adults to be, look, act a certain way? And then we wonder why people are burnt out and overwhelmed. And that is where we are going wrong when we approach ADHD. I really, really think it's about managing your perception. Because there are plenty of people out there who have ADHD who either have no idea that they have ADHD because they've learned to navigate it in a healthy way, or they have ADHD but they don't see it as a limitation. There's a big difference between how you approach ADHD. And that difference ultimately determines the life that you live. If somebody needs glasses, I wouldn't say they have an eyesight disorder. If somebody is in a wheelchair, I wouldn't say that they have a mobility disorder. And I think that these labels can sometimes be really limiting, especially if we are programmed to think that we are somehow less than. It is about managing your perception of self. If you tell yourself, I'm bad at time management, because I have ADHD. What do you think the chances are of you going out and finding strategies that work for you to better manage your time? If you constantly tell yourself, my life is a dumpster fire because I have ADHD, the chances of you creating a life of simplicity and ease are less than zero. If you constantly tell yourself, I'm bad with money because I'm so impulsive, because I have ADHD, you will never give yourself the opportunity to learn how you can actually be good with money. And this is not me minimizing or dismissing ADHD. I have a formal diagnosis. I am medicated for it. I believe in medication, and I believe that it is a powerful tool. I use it myself. But for the longest time, for 10 years, I used medication as a Band-Aid. And then I wondered why certain areas of my life were a dumpster fire. Medication alone is not going to help you manage ADHD. It's not the only tool in your toolbox. It can't be. Because medication is not going to change who you are. Pills don't teach skills. They can certainly help, right? I found that when I first started coaching clients with ADHD, I came equipped with all of these time management and productivity tools, and I found that client after client after client, I never even had to use them. I never even got a chance to talk about these time management strategies because they didn't need them. They already knew what the tools were. When I studied ADHD, and I studied the Barkleys and the Hallowells and the Hinshaws, and they tell us a lot about executive functions, right? These brain functions that we are supposedly deficient in, right? And on paper, the research says that people with ADHD struggle with self-control, with emotional regulation, with time management, with inattention. Those things aren't actually what's getting in the way of people living their lives and thriving. That is what I found when I first started working with ADHD clients, and that has been confirmed for me hundreds, if not thousands of times. Those executive functions aren't actually what's getting in the way. Let me give you an example. I had a client who was raised to always turn the other cheek, always be the bigger person, right? Always take the higher road. I'm sure you can imagine maybe if you grew up with something like this, right? Or even like if you were conditioned to, to not make a fuss, or to not draw attention to yourself, whatever, okay? We can all relate to a lot of this. And so he found himself in situations in adulthood over and over and over again where he was being taken advantage of. And then he would find himself, this is when he came to me, is he would find himself really angry, and he would end up ruminating on all these situations, and it would be really distracting for him throughout the day. On the surface, it seemed like there was an emotional dysregulation issue, right? But if you really look into it, the issue here was not his ADHD. It's the fact that he was taught to suppress his anger. And so now when the anger comes up for him, he is judging himself for it. And that is what was distracting him all day long, is because he was not allowed to express his anger. That is what became distracting. Or how about another client that I had who was also getting really distracted at work, and she felt like she was always really busy, but never getting anything done, never getting enough done. And I bet you can relate to that as well. On the surface, it sounds like a time management issue, right? If we're not getting enough done, well, let's look at how you're managing your time. Yada, yada, yada. But when I really dug deep, it turned out that there were people-pleasing tendencies and a lack of boundaries, because she was a woman in a corporate leadership position. And so she felt like she needed the conditioning, okay? The conditioning was that she needed to be super responsive to anything that came her way. Every email, every Slack message, every phone call. And listen, if you are trying to do deep work, if you are trying to get focused, that is literally the worst possible situation for you to be in. If you are getting pulled every 5 minutes by the ping of a Slack message, that's not inattention. That's not ADHD at fault. It is a lack of boundaries. She was in a toxic work environment where she was expected to be hyper-vigilant, and then she was blaming herself for not being able to get enough work done. My friends, this is not an ADHD issue. This is not a brain wiring issue. This is an issue of self-acceptance. This is an issue of defining your core values. This is an issue of extricating your value from the perception of others. So many struggles like this that people think are because of the way that their brain is wired are actually a result of our society being really unhealthy. It's a result of, not being taught proper skills or boundaries as a kid. It's actually not a time management issue. It's a boundaries issue. It's actually not an emotional regulation issue. It's the fact that you were never taught how to process your emotions. And so now when you have emotions, when you are just showing up as your regular human self, you judge yourself for them. It's actually not a hyperactivity issue. It's that humans were not meant to sit at a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day. And kids, my God, kids are not meant to be sitting at a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day. Give me a fucking break. It's actually not an impulsivity issue that is causing you to doom scroll and online shop. Those are coping mechanisms that you use to deal with a life that is not fully aligned. Let me regulate my damn self. Because honestly, it's what I found in the ADHD space is that we're either victim shaming or we're allowing ourselves to stay stuck in victim mentality. Victim shaming is when you give somebody too much to do, and when they can't do it, you blame ADHD, right? You blame them. Or you have too much to do and you blame yourself without pausing to actually look at the facts and say, this is too much. This doesn't make sense. I'm spending too much time over here and it's taking away from time over there. Being stuck in victim mentality is when you say, I can't do this because I have ADHD. Or I can't do this because I have little kids. It's a really hard season. My kids are too much. They have ADHD and we just can't keep up. My husband works nights and he doesn't help me and I don't live near family. And capitalism and politics and rah! Neither of those is helpful. Neither victim shaming nor victim mentality is helpful. People come to me and they say, Anna, I'm so overwhelmed. And they tell me all of the things that they want to get done in a day and they say, can you help me? And this either looks one of two ways. It's either every minute of their day is accounted for, like they're barely getting any sleep or barely getting even time to like eat or take a sip of water or go to the bathroom. They're working around the clock. They're burnt out. Or they're stuck in paralysis, right? And in both cases, they have unrealistic expectations. If they're doing way too much and not taking time for the things that matter, that's unrealistic expectations. Or if they're trying to do too much or thinking about doing too much and getting paralyzed by the thought of it and doing nothing at all, that's also unrealistic expectations. What people think they need is some sort of time management strategy, some sort of magic pill or magic 10-step program that would allow them to do too much and never feel insecure and never piss anybody off or never have to set a boundary, right? That's what they think that they need, right? It's just like a magic formula that's going to allow them to never experience an uncomfortable emotion. And the very first phase of the Untamed Freedom Formula is getting them to understand themselves, understand their brains, what they believe in, what they stand for, and accept that this magic formula doesn't exist. There is no productivity strategy that will allow you to do 80 hours of work in 10 hours. And that is what most people are trying to do, and they get really frustrated with themselves when they're not able to do 80 hours of work in 10 hours. And they tell themselves it's because they have ADHD, when it's really not that at all. There is a duality to ADHD. There's a duality to overwhelm. There's a duality to everything. There's light and dark. There's day and night, hot and cold. And you need both. You need both. You need to hold space for both. So when things get difficult, yes, you can acknowledge that things are difficult. And you can acknowledge that maybe your brain is wired differently and it makes certain tasks more challenging, but you can also hold yourself to a higher standard. You can also cast a vision for yourself of the life that you want to lead. Oftentimes we get overwhelmed because we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We don't know what the point is, right? And think about saying that to a kid, right? Do this. Why? Because I said so. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it for a kid, and it shouldn't cut it for an adult either. There is no 10-step plan that will allow you to do too much. It's a process of culling down to what's really essential. There is no 10-step plan for snapping out of victim mindset. It is a process of getting honest with yourself. There is no 10-step plan for knowing ahead of time that your decision will work out in your favor, that it's going to be the right one, because that's called fortune telling. Making decisions is a process of building self-trust. Okay, my friends, so at the end of every episode, I want to leave you with a question. And today's question is, what is really getting in the way of you living the life that you envision for yourself? Because it's not ADHD. ADHD is not the thing that is getting in your way. I want you to dig deeper than that. Is it people pleasing? Is it perfectionism? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it loneliness? Is it that you don't know what you want out of life? Is it that you want other people to validate your worth? Is it that you're avoiding uncomfortable emotions? Thanks for tuning into the first episode. I am so excited to dive deeper into this journey with you. I hope that you choose to thrive today, and I know you will, because you're a wild one.